For decades, space was a playground for the elite. If you weren't a superpower like the US or Russia, or a billion-dollar giant like Boeing, you simply didn't have a seat at the table. Space was slow, it was massive, and it was incredibly expensive. But look at the screen now. That era is officially dead. While the world was watching SpaceX build the biggest rockets in history, a silent revolution was brewing in the labs of Bengaluru, Chennai, and Hyderabad. Today, Indian startups aren't just participating in the space race, they are rewriting the rules of the small satellite market. We are talking about the rockets built in 72 hours, engines printed on 3D printers, and launch costs that are making global giants look like relics of the past. Why are the world's biggest tech companies now looking to Indian startups to get their tech into orbit? Today, in viral context, we are breaking down how Indian went from a low cost service provider to the undisputed leader of the small satellite race. Let's dive in. To understand why the world is paying attention, you have to look at the sheer velocity of this growth. Just over a decade ago, in 2014, Indian had exactly one registered space startup. Today, as we sit in 2026, that number has exploded to over 400. We aren't just seeing more companies, we are seeing more capital. Private investment in these startups has officially crossed the $600 million mark. But here is the statistics that should keep global competitors awake at night. The Indian space economy is currently growing at nearly 28% annually. That is twice as fast as the global average. While the rest of the world is growing steadily, India is in a vertical climb. Experts project that the domestic space market, valued at $13 billion today, is on a direct flight path to hit 44 billion by the early 2030s. But this isn't just about big numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about a fundamental shift in the who is building the tech. For the first time in the history, the innovation isn't just coming from the government, it's coming from the streets of our tech hubs. So, how are they doing it so cheaper than the rest of the world? Let's look at the tech. If you want to know how a startup in Chennai or Hyderabad can overturn a multi-billion-dollar giant, look at the engine on your screen. This is the Agnilet, developed by the Agnikul Cosmos. Traditionally, building a rocket engine in is a nightmare. It requires thousands of individual parts, valves, injectors, cooling channels, all painstakingly welded together over 6 months. By Indian startups have deleted the assembly line entirely. They are 3D printed the entire engine as one single integrated piece of metal. We are talking about taking a process that used to take months and shrinking it down to just a few days. And it's not just Agnikul. Over at Skyroot Aerospace Infinity Campus, India's first private rocket factory, they are using high precision robotics and carbon composites to build rockets that are lighter, stronger, and more fuel efficient than almost anything in their class. This isn't just a tech flex, it's a business strategy. By removing the need for thousands of suppliers and complex welds, they have removed the cost and risk of failure. In 2026, the small satellite race isn't being won by the biggest wallet, it's being won by the fastest printer. Now, once these rockets are in the air, what exactly are they carrying? Let's talk about the new gold. Space isn't just about reaching orbit anymore, it's about the quality of the data you bring back. Most satellites today see the world in just 3 or 4 colors: red, green, and blue, much like the human eye. But Indian startups Pixxel has developed a superpower for their satellites called Hyperspectral imaging. Instead of using 3 colors, Pixxel's Firefly constellation sees the world in over 150 spectral bands. Think of it like this: if a standard satellite sees a forest as just a green patch, Pixxel sensors can tell you the exact species of the trees, their moisture levels, and even if a specific group of plants is in the early stages of diseases, weeks before a human eye could see it on the ground. This isn't just for farmers. We are talking about detecting methane leaks from the space to fight climate change or identifying specific minerals for mining companies with 5-meter resolution. This is 6 times sharper than the currently industry standard. By 2026, Pixxel is completing its global health monitor for the planet. They aren't just selling pictures, they are selling a cheat code for the global economy. This level of detail used to be reserved for secretive military projects, but now a startup from Bangalore is making it available to the entire world. But who is paying for all of this? Let's talk about the money. Innovation is expensive, and for years, the biggest hurdle of Indian space startups wasn't the science, it was the red tape. But in 2024, the government pulled the trigger on a massive policy shift that changed everything. First, they opened the doors for 100% foreign direct investment. This move allowed global capital to flow directly into satellite manufacturing and component systems without the old, slow approval processes. Foreign investors in Silicon Valley or London, India suddenly become the most attractive space hub on the planet. But the real game changer came from within. The government established a dedicated 1000 crore venture capital fund specifically for space startups, managed under in spec. This fund isn't just about handing out checks. It's a strategic move to ensure that our brightest mind don't have to leave the country to find funding. By providing this early stage risk capital, the government is effectively de-risking the industry for private players. They have turned space from a government monopoly into a thriving open market playground. As we will see in the previous, this policy shift has created a cost advantage that the Western giants simply cannot match. Now the big question, how can a small startup compete with a giant like SpaceX? Elon Musk's transporter missions are famous for being cheap. Think of them like a giant city bus. You buy a seat, you pack your satellite with 100 others, and you go where the bus goes. But what if your satellite needs to go to a very specific unique orbit? Or what if your tech is ready now, but the bus doesn't leave for another 6 months? This is where Indian startups have found their killer app. Companies like Skyroot and Agnikul aren't trying to be the bus, they are the Uber and the taxi of space. With rockets like Vikram 1, they offer dedicated access. They will take only your satellite exactly when you want to go and drop you off at the precise GPS coordinate in space that you need. Even though SpaceX might be cheaper per kilometer, the total cost of waiting 6 months of or building a complex space tug to move your satellite to the right spot is much higher. By 2026, the world's tech companies have realized that cheap isn't always better. Speed and precision are the new currencies of the space race, and India is currently the fastest player on the track. Now let's look at the what this means for the future in our final slide. So, where does this all lead? We aren't just looking at a few successful startups. We are witnessing the birth of a global space superpower. By 2030, the projections are staggering. Experts predict that Indian private companies will be conducting over 40 launches every single year for global customers. India is on a direct path to capture nearly 10% of the global space market by the end of this decade and 15% by 2047. But it's not just about the money. We are talking about Indian startups becoming the backbone of the global supply chain, manufacturing one third of the all Earth observation satellites for the entire planet. While the giants of the past are struggling with aging infrastructure and massive overheads, India's lean, 3D printed, taxi on demand model is setting the pace. From helping farmers with hyperspectral data to building our very own Bharati Antariksh station by 2035. The viral context here is simple. The space race isn't a marathon for the few anymore. It's an open sprint, and right now India is one of to catch. The sky was never the limit. It was just the starting line. Thanks for the watching this deep dive into the small satellite race. I will see you in the next. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.